There was a man who once came to see me, well dressed, calm on the surface, but his eyes were red, voice trembling slightly. He said, "Last week, I hit my son. He's only 10. I didn't judge. I just sat with him, listening, not as an expert, but as a mirror." He took a shaky breath and continued. He dropped a glass of water. That's all, but the way he looked at me, I don't even know why I snapped like that. He paused, clearly shaken, not by the boy's action, but by his own. The moment had passed, but the guilt, it lingered. And I said gently, "You didn't get angry because of a glass of water. That wasn't the real trigger." The truth is, most of us don't get angry for the reasons we think we do. We say it's because someone was rude, or unfair, or disrespectful, but often, our anger has less to do with what's happening around us, and everything to do with what's unresolved within us. In therapy, we call it an emotional trigger. A small word, a tone, a glance, can pierce right through the armor, reaching wounds we didn't even know we still carried. Anger, at its core, is a defense. It's our brain saying, "I feel unsafe, I feel hurt, I feel unseen." And if we don't pause long enough to understand that, we end up lashing out at the people we love the most. Biologically, it's tied to something we call amygdala hijack. When your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, the amygdala takes over. Rational thought is shut down. Your heart races, your vision narrows, you go into fight mode before the thinking brain even has a chance to show up. That's why you might say things in anger you'd never say otherwise. Or why small things feel disproportionately huge in the heat of the moment. Your body isn't reacting to a spilled glass. It's reacting to a perceived danger, maybe of losing control, of being disrespected, or of being unloved. Now, close your eyes for just a moment. Think about the last time you truly lost your temper. Was it really about what was happening in front of you? Or was something deeper being touched, a part of you that felt unseen, dismissed, or abandoned? There's a quote by Marcus Aurelius that says, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." What hurts us isn't always the situation, it's the meaning we attach to it. In therapy, I've seen this over and over again. A woman once told me she couldn't stand hearing her son say, "Mom, you just don't get it." She'd lash out, scream, slam doors, and then regret it. When we traced the emotion back, it wasn't her son she was angry with. It was a memory of her own mother saying, "I don't understand you, you're ridiculous." Her son's words reopened an old wound she never realized was still bleeding. That's the nature of emotional encoding. Certain words or behaviors get recorded in the nervous system, and years later, they still push the same buttons, unless we learn to rewrite the story. There's an old Buddhist saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And yet, so many of us do exactly that. We carry rage, we rehearse arguments, we hold grudges like trophies, but the only one being drained is ourselves. We've been taught that anger equals strength. That yelling means power, that slamming the table shows dominance. But the truth I've learned in therapy is the opposite. The people who shout the loudest are often the ones feeling most helpless. They haven't learned the language of emotions. They only know one thing: explode or collapse. There's an ancient Taoist passage that says, "He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is truly mighty." It doesn't encourage silence out of fear, but silence out of understanding. To see your reaction before it consumes you. To recognize, this anger is not me, it's a message asking to be heard. I once worked with a literature teacher named Tone. He used to snap at his students, shout at his wife, slam things out of frustration. But after a mild stroke, his doctor told him to start meditating or risk permanent damage. And something shifted. He began to notice the wave of anger rising, and instead of riding it, he simply watched it pass. It wasn't about suppressing emotion. It was about observing without drowning. And that's what I want for you, not to suppress who you are. Not to pretend you're never angry, but to master the art of staying grounded even when the storm hits. Peace isn't passive. It's a skill, a practice, a choice. And it begins the moment you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why does this hurt so deeply?" Because somewhere within that question is the key to your healing. Why is it that sometimes just a small comment, a minor inconvenience, can send us into a spiral. Why can a single glance, a sarcastic tone, or someone ignoring a message trigger such a strong emotional reaction? It's because your nervous system is constantly scanning for danger, whether it's physical, emotional, or social. Even when you're safe, your body remembers everything that wasn't. This is the legacy of a primitive brain in a modern world. At the center of it all is a small almond-shaped part of your brain, the amygdala. Its job is to protect you, and it does that by reacting fast, too fast, before your rational brain, your thinking self, has time to weigh the facts. The amygdala has already sounded the alarm. It doesn't care about nuance. It doesn't ask, is this person just tired, or did they mean to hurt me? It only asks one thing. Is this safe or dangerous? And the moment it feels dangerous, it launches a full body response. Heart rate spikes. Blood rushes to your fists. Your voice rises. Your vision narrows. And you start to feel like someone else entirely. This is amygdala hijack. And if you've ever said something in anger that you instantly regretted, this is why. The problem is, the danger isn't usually about what's happening now. It's a reminder of something that happened before. A tone that reminds you of a parent's rejection. A dismissal that echoes an old betrayal. A missed call that wakes up the fear of abandonment. These aren't just feelings. They're stored data in your nervous system. That's why we can't just think our way out of anger. We have to go deeper. We have to feel our way in. I once worked with a couple, married for 10 years, on the brink of divorce. The husband, let's call him Kwang, loved his wife deeply. But whenever she brought up concerns or made a complaint, he'd erupt, shouting, slamming doors, sometimes even breaking things. Then he'd come back the next day ashamed, lost, and heartbroken. I don't know what's wrong with me, he said one day in session. She just said I don't help enough at home. That's it. But something in me snaps. I can't control it. So I asked him, has anyone ever said something like that to you before? Not recently, but when you were a kid. He was silent for a while. Then his eyes welled up. My mom, he whispered. She used to say, you're useless. You don't help with anything. You're a burden. And there it was. His wife's comment didn't create the anger, it awakened it. It wasn't about her, it was about the boy he used to be, the one still aching to be enough. That's what we call emotional time travel in therapy. The present becomes fused with the past. And we start reacting to ghosts, old voices, old wounds, without even realizing it. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, people are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of things. It's never just the words. It's the meaning you attach to them. It's the story you tell yourself about what those words mean about you. In healing, the first step isn't to silence your emotions, it's to become curious about them. To ask, what part of me is hurting right now? What am I afraid this means about me? Is this the truth? Or just an old fear resurfacing? There's a woman I worked with, DM. She was a high-level manager, known for being sharp, efficient, and reactive. She couldn't stand incompetence. When her team made a mistake, she'd snap instantly. I asked her to imagine the same situation, but with a 5-year-old child making the error. She laughed. Of course I wouldn't get mad. It's a kid. Exactly. So what changed? Not the mistake. What changed was her interpretation of it. With a child, she didn't expect perfection, but with adults, especially subordinates, she attached the mistake to something deeper. They don't respect me. They think I'm not worthy of being followed. They're trying to undermine me. These weren't facts. They were stories her brain was telling to make sense of a wound. Once she saw the story, the anger lost its grip. And that's how healing begins, not with control, but with awareness. The Stoics didn't teach emotional suppression. They taught emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose your response instead of becoming a slave to it. When something upsets you, you can say, this hurts. Yes, but is it worth my peace? Do I need to react, or can I choose to understand? This shift, from reacting to observing, can change everything. It's not about being passive. It's about being powerful in stillness. I often teach a practice called the 3S pause. It's simple, but it can rewire your emotional life. Stop, pause the moment you feel the trigger. See, acknowledge the emotion. Name it. I feel hurt. I feel dismissed. I feel disrespected. Shift, ask, what else could be true here? What would a wiser version of me choose now? Do this enough times, and your brain begins to learn. I'm not my anger, I'm the one who chooses what to do with it. I had a young man once tell me, after practicing this for a few weeks, I don't blow up like I used to. It's weird, I feel like I'm not giving people the remote control to my nervous system anymore. And that's the thing, anger often feels like a release of power. But most of the time, it's a surrender of control. True strength isn't lashing out. It's staying rooted when everything in you wants to erupt. And that strength can be learned. It begins not when you suppress emotion, but when you become the observer of it. When you ask not, how do I stop being angry? But instead, what is this anger trying to protect in me, and is there a better way to protect it? I once worked with a woman named Fan. She was in her early 40s. Quiet, composed, soft-spoken, but you could hear the fatigue behind every word. She said, I live with a man who gets angry a lot. He doesn't hit me, he doesn't scream, but when he's mad, he slams doors, breaks things, and then goes silent. It's like I'm trapped in a house full of tension, but no words. And then she added something that stayed with me. I'm so tired. I don't want to fight. I don't want to leave. I just want peace. But maybe that means I'm weak, that I'm just tolerating this. I didn't say anything at first. In therapy, it's not always about giving answers. It's about making space for truth to rise. Over time, we unpacked it all, and what we found was this: her silence wasn't weakness. Her silence was a pattern, born from a childhood where peace only came when no one made noise. She had grown up with a father who drank, a mother who cried in secret, a household where emotions were volcanic. For her, survival meant staying small, staying quiet, and avoiding conflict at all costs. She wasn't tolerating, she was protecting herself the only way she knew how. But there's a difference between surviving and truly living. So I told her something I want you to remember too. There are two kinds of silence. One is the silence of fear. The other is the silence of strength. What you need now is not reaction, but presence. She nodded, and that's where we began, by helping her find her center again. Not through arguments or explanations, but through stillness with awareness. She started practicing a simple technique I teach called stop, see, shift, the same one I shared earlier. One day, after a session, she told me, he was angry again. Usually I'd freeze or try to fix it. But this time, I just breathed. I looked at him and said, I hear that you're upset. We can talk when we're both calm. And then I left the room. She wasn't passive. She wasn't avoiding. She was choosing herself, calmly, clearly, and without fear. That is strength. There's a passage in Taoist philosophy that says, not contending is the greatest contention. This isn't about losing your voice. It's about rising above the need to be loud to be heard. Because here's the truth. You don't need to prove yourself to be worthy. You don't need to argue to hold your ground. You don't need to explode to protect your heart. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay grounded when chaos wants you to collapse. Another client of mine, a gentleman named Tone, was once a teacher. He told me, I used to yell at my students, argue with my wife, bark at my kids. But then I had a health scare, a minor stroke. My doctor said, you need to learn to calm your system, or this could happen again. So he began meditating, not because he wanted to be spiritual, but because he wanted to stay alive. And slowly, he noticed something incredible. The wave of anger still came, but now, he could see it coming. And instead of reacting, he waited, he breathed, and the wave passed. This is the sacred pause. It's not suppression, it's clarity in motion. He told me once, I used to think yelling made me strong. Now I know, quiet is harder, but it gives me back my life. And that's exactly what I want for you, not to bottle things up. Not to pretend, but to reclaim your power in a way that nourishes you, instead of draining you. There's an old Buddhist metaphor I love. Anger is like a burning coal, whoever holds it first, burns first. So maybe the question isn't, how do I get him to stop hurting me? Maybe the better question is, why am I still holding the fire? I gave Fan a 7-day practice I often use in therapy. I call it 7 days of no reaction. Simple, but transformative. Each time something upsets you, instead of reacting, pause and write, what happened? What emotion arose? What was my automatic urge? If I didn't react, what would I be protecting in myself? She did this faithfully. At first it was hard. But by day 5, something shifted. She said, I realized, I don't need to change him. I need to choose me. Every time I don't react, I feel a little more like myself. And I smiled. Because that's not weakness. That's freedom. You don't need to win every battle. You don't even need to fight. You just need to stop giving your peace away in exchange for validation. Silence isn't giving up. Silence, when chosen with clarity, is a declaration. I don't owe you a reaction to prove my worth. I know who I am. And I choose peace. That's the energy I want you to walk into your life with. Not the fire of revenge, but the calm of someone who has nothing to prove. By now, you've seen that anger isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. And messengers aren't meant to be silenced. They're meant to be understood. But understanding alone isn't enough. Insight must become integration. Otherwise, we keep reading books about peace while screaming in traffic. So let's talk about the body. Because anger doesn't just live in the mind. It lives in the body, tight shoulders, clenched jaws, shallow breaths. You don't need more self-control. You need nervous system regulation. And that starts with the breath. One of the simplest, most effective tools I teach in therapy is something called compassionate breathing, what I like to call the kindness breath. It goes like this. Sit down, close your eyes, inhale gently for 4 seconds, imagine breathing in calm. Hold for 2 seconds. Exhale slowly for 6 seconds, imagine releasing heat, tension, judgment. Repeat 10 times. But here's the secret, don't try to get rid of the anger. Just sit with it, breathe with it, like you would sit next to a frightened child. Because that's often what your anger really is, a younger part of you. Scared and unheard. This is what Lao Tzu meant when he said, to remain calm when others lose their heads is the mark of real strength. It's not passivity, it's deep, anchored presence. Now, another tool I recommend is called emotional journaling. It's how we move from unconscious reaction to conscious reflection. Every time something upsets you, write it out using these 4 prompts. 1. What happened? 2. What did I feel? 3. What story did my mind create? 4. What do I actually need right now? One of my clients once wrote, my boss cut me off in a meeting. I felt invisible. The story I told myself was that I'm not respected. But what I really needed was acknowledgement, and to remind myself that one moment doesn't define my worth. Can you feel the shift there? Journaling slows the mind. It turns a forest fire into a candle flame. It gives your brain something it rarely gets during anger, context. And then there's presence practice, or as some call it, micro-meditation. Forget the idea that you need 30 minutes in lotus pose. All you need is 3 minutes of stillness. Here's how. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, feel the weight of your body, the temperature of the air. Focus on one inhale, then one exhale. That's it. When thoughts come, and they will, don't chase them. Just come back to the breath. 3 minutes, that's all. What this does, over time, is strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, logic, and decision-making. And when that part gets stronger, the amygdala, the panic center, loses its grip. It's not magic, it's neuroscience, and you can retrain it like a muscle. Another thing I often tell clients is this. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to correct every misconception. You don't have to defend your dignity to those who never saw it in the first place. Instead, I teach what I call conscious response statements. The next time someone says something offensive or passive-aggressive, try these instead of reacting. I hear that you're upset. Let's talk later when we're both in a better space. I'm not in a place to engage in this right now. I choose not to respond in anger. I value peace more than being right. These aren't weaknesses, they're boundaries. And boundaries are what keep your peace sacred. I once had a client named Vin. His relationship was on the edge. His partner would yell, push his buttons, accuse him of shutting down. He used to react every time, defensive, explosive, exhausted, until one day, after weeks of work, he didn't. Instead, he paused, took a deep breath, and said, I can see you're hurting, and I want to understand, but I won't do it this way. She froze, because the pattern had been broken. No yelling, no silence, just presence. And slowly, everything changed. You see, when you don't play the game ends. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the cycle. And you return home, to yourself. I want you to feel what it's like to walk into conflict with peace still intact. To hold your center when the world is trying to pull you out of it. To choose stillness, not because you're afraid, but because you're finally free. Remember, you don't owe anyone your energy. You don't have to be everything for everyone. You just have to protect the space within you where peace lives. And peace doesn't shout, it whispers. But when you start listening, everything shifts. I once led a group therapy session and asked a question. When was the last time you got truly angry, and what were you actually angry about? A man named Lam raised his hand. Late 40s, corporate type. He said, last week, my boss, who's 10 years younger than me, told me I wasn't strategic enough. I lost it. I waited. He looked down, almost ashamed, and added, I've worked for over 20 years. I know I'm not perfect. But the way he said it, I felt humiliated, like I didn't matter. So I asked, were you really angry at him? Or were you angry at the feeling of not being respected anymore? Silence. Then, softly, he said, I think I was angry because I didn't feel important. That's the truth behind many of our outbursts. What we call anger is often just a cracked ego trying to hold itself together. And I don't say that to shame you. I say it with compassion, because I've seen this pattern 100 times. We don't just get angry at people. We get angry at what their words or actions seem to say about us. You interrupted me, becomes, you don't respect me. You forgot my birthday, becomes, I don't matter to you. You corrected me, becomes, you think I'm stupid. But here's the thing, none of that is truth. It's interpretation filtered through the fragile lens of ego. There's a teaching in Confucianism that says, the noble person is unmoved by the words of the small-minded. He knows his worth, and has no need to defend it. True confidence doesn't need applause. True dignity doesn't demand recognition. It simply knows what it is, with or without approval. I once worked with a man named Vu. In his 40s, he was once the CEO of a rising tech company. But after a financial crisis, he lost his position. He stayed on in the company as a regular employee, watching younger, less experienced people lead what he built. He said to me, it's humiliating, they act like I'm irrelevant. In those early weeks, he was filled with resentment. He snapped at people, held grudges, constantly replayed conversations in his mind. But over time, we worked through the deeper layer. And one day, he came into session and told me this story. Last week, a junior guy reviewed my presentation slides and said, this looks a little outdated, want me to modernize it? In the past, I would have been furious, but this time, I just said, sure, what do you think would work better? And he looked shocked. Then he apologized. I realized, I'm not angry anymore, because I'm not trying to prove anything. And that is growth. That's ego transcendence. That's the moment you stop defending who you used to be, and start living who you've become. When you no longer need to be right. When you stop needing to be important. When you let go of the need to be seen in a certain light. You become unshakable. There's a Taoist line I love. He who knows he has enough is truly rich. When you know your worth, you don't need to fight for it in every conversation. You don't have to win the argument. You don't need to clap back. You don't need revenge. You just stand in your knowing. And from that space, you can stop reacting and start choosing. So let me give you a few healing practices that have helped many of my clients untangle their ego from their truth. The first is something I call the letter you'll never send. Write a letter to the person who made you feel small. But don't write to vent. Write to understand yourself. Use these 3 questions as your guide. 1. What did their words trigger in me? 2. What old wound did this reopen? 3. If I didn't need to prove anything to them, how would I feel? You may cry. You may rage. You may breathe for the first time in weeks. Let the letter be a mirror, not a weapon. Then burn it, or keep it. But no, the letter is for you, not them. Next, try the self-worth gratitude practice. Every night, write down 3 things you value about yourself, not your achievements. Not your roles, just your being. I paused instead of yelling. I showed up even when I was tired. I kept my heart soft when it wanted to shut down. This begins to rebuild your self-worth from the inside, so you no longer need to demand it from the outside. Finally, I teach a practice called letting others be wrong. For one day, let someone misjudge you, let them misunderstand you, let them be wrong about you, and don't correct them. Just smile and think, my peace matters more than your opinion. This isn't defeat, it's liberation. You'll feel it, a lightness in your chest, a quiet pride in your breath, the gentle power of someone who has nothing to defend, and nothing to hide, and that is true dignity. There was a woman I worked with named Lan. She was in her early 40s. Soft voice, eyes that held quiet sorrow. Her story wasn't dramatic, at least not on the surface. But the ache was real. Her husband had cheated. Her in-laws blamed her. Her closest friends turned silent. But what struck me wasn't the pain she carried, it was the way she carried it. She didn't sob, she didn't rant, she just said, in a whisper, "I'm tired, I don't want revenge, I don't want to run, I just want peace." And then she asked a question that I've heard from so many souls who are exhausted. Not by what happened, but by carrying it too long. Does letting go mean I'm weak? I looked at her, and gently said, letting go isn't weakness. It's when your healing begins to outrun your hurt. She had spent months in survival mode, yelling, accusing, demanding apologies, but the peace she longed for didn't live in any of those places. She thought she needed closure. She thought she needed understanding. But what she really needed was permission to stop needing anything from him at all. That night, alone in her apartment, after putting her son to bed, something shifted. She sat in the silence she used to dread. She cried without blaming, and then, she exhaled, not just breath, but all the stories. He should have known better, they shouldn't have blamed me. My friends should have stood up for me. She let it all go. Not because they were right. Not because they deserved forgiveness. But because she no longer wanted to be held hostage by their choices. She chose herself, not the broken version they left behind, but the woman who was still standing. And from that moment on, she started practicing a new kind of presence. She meditated every morning, just 5 minutes. She wrote one sentence a day in her journal, "Today, I choose to return to myself." She stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped waiting for people to get it. And strangely, that's when people started listening. Her husband returned, months later, begging for a second chance. Her in-laws softened. Her friends reached out. But by then, she didn't need him to come back. Because she had already come home. When she told me all of this in session, she wasn't smiling out of pride. She was glowing from peace. That's what happens when you stop being defined by someone else's actions, and start being led by your own alignment. There's a phrase in Tibetan Buddhism that says, if you carry anger like treasure, you will live in a prison no one else can see. Let that sink in. You may not be able to control what others say. You may not be able to undo the disrespect, the betrayal, the lies, but you can choose whether or not you carry them. You can choose to return the weight that was never yours to bear. And the moment you do, you become untouchable. Not cold, not closed off, but clear, rooted, whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if someone can provoke you, realize they are your master until you let go of the need to react. And that's what I want to leave you with. Not a technique, not a quote, but a shift in identity. You are no longer a person who gets pulled into every storm. You are no longer someone who gives away your peace to prove a point. You are not a puppet dancing for validation. You are someone who breathes, who pauses, who walks away not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. You don't need to be understood to know your truth. You don't need an apology to feel whole again. You don't need closure to begin a new chapter. All you need is to come home to yourself. So here's a practice I give to clients who are ready to truly release the grip of anger. The 5-minute letting go ritual. 1. Sit quietly. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. 2. Think of the person or situation you're still holding on to. 3. Say aloud or silently, I see the pain, I honor it, but I choose to stop carrying it. 4. Inhale slowly, imagining the pain as smoke. 5. Exhale, releasing the smoke into the wind. 6. End with the words, I am not what happened to me. I am who I choose to become now. Do this whenever your chest tightens. Whenever the old narrative resurfaces. Whenever someone tries to pull you back into the version of yourself you've outgrown. Because you don't live there anymore. You've left the battlefield. You're not interested in winning arguments. You're interested in living in peace. That is your revolution. And no one can take that away from you. If you've made it to this point, you're not just listening, you're healing. You didn't skip through. You didn't look away. You stayed with your own truth. And that tells me something. You're not broken. You're brave. You're becoming someone new. Maybe not louder, maybe not tougher, but softer, in a way that's unshakable. You've begun to see that anger was never the real problem. It was a signal, a story, a scared inner voice that didn't know how else to speak. You've seen that silence doesn't mean surrender. It can mean sovereignty, that letting go isn't weakness. It's wisdom, and that not every battle is yours to fight, especially when the real victory is within. So let's breathe, one last time, together. Inhale, exhale, say it softly, I am safe, I am steady, I am whole. And now, remember these 5 truths. Carry them like lanterns. 1. You are not your reactions. You are the one who sees the reaction and chooses differently. 2. Not everyone deserves access to your nervous system. Protect your peace like you protect your breath. 3. You don't need to defend your worth. You only need to embody it. 4. Sometimes the best response is none. Sometimes the highest boundary is silence. 5. Your peace is your power. And no one can take it unless you hand it to them. So if you walk away from this video with one thing, let it be this. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to never feel angry again. You just need to notice when it rises, and remember, I have a choice now. And every time you choose differently, you change your wiring, you soften the armor, you come back home. So when they test you, when they provoke you, when life pushes your buttons, pause, breathe, smile, even, and know, they don't get to decide who I become today. That's your sacred right, your freedom, your gift to yourself. As a therapist, I've sat with hundreds of stories. Stories of betrayal, heartbreak, guilt, rage. And what I've learned is this. The strongest people I've ever met weren't the ones who yelled the loudest. They were the ones who chose not to yell at all, not because they couldn't, but because they had nothing left to prove. They weren't chasing justice. They were living in peace. And now, so are you. You may still stumble. You may still get triggered. That's okay. But now, you'll catch it. Now, you'll pause. Now, you'll return to yourself faster than ever before. That's what healing looks like. Not perfection, but practice. Not controlling others, but choosing yourself, again and again. So thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for showing up for your inner world. Thank you for giving yourself what maybe no one else ever did. The chance to be free. Wherever you are right now, sitting alone, walking outside, lying in bed with your phone resting on your chest, I want you to know this. I see you, I respect you, and I'm proud of the work you've done, even if it's silent. Especially when it's silent, because peace doesn't make a sound, but it changes everything. This is Mental Balance USA, and I'll see you in the next video, when you're ready to take the next step. But for now, just rest. You've done enough. You are enough. And the world needs more people like you. Quietly powerful, calmly alive, finally free.